Chinese experience when it comes to different projects that are carried out by the Egyptian ministries, like, of course, the project of Textile City that is established with the Chinese partnership in Sadat City.
You know, there are several projects going on in Egypt now, but done by Chinese giant companies. We have for example, the project of the electric train in eastern part of Cairo that will go. It's a long way. I mean, actually arriving to the new administrative city, for example, new administrative capital. This is a very good project. We have the project, for example, of the new administrative capital itself. The Chinese companies are now implementing, and now a good part of this project. We have also the new Alamein city. It's a very big project done by Chinese companies as well. We have the project of upgrading the electricity network of Egypt. There is a Chinese company that's taking a good part of it. Then you mentioned now the textile city. You see, there are many projects going on nowadays between Egypt and China. The participation of the Chinese companies in Egypt is increasing tremendously. The Chinese investments in Egypt are increasing as well. So all these issues will be discussed between the two presidents, because always President Sisi always is inviting Chinese companies to come, more Chinese companies to come to Egypt, and asking for more investments from China. And actually, this is taking place on ground nowadays.
Right. There is also the mechanisms of technology that has been developed in China year after year, but as Egypt is retaining its leading role in the region and have retained its economic boom and have developed its mechanisms of technology, have developed several mega projects like the infrastructure project, housing projects, developmental project, cultural, you name it. How is China going to invest on the Egyptian market for a country like Egypt?
Well, actually, as I mentioned, Chinese investments in general is increasing in Egypt. We have investments, for example, in the Chinese area in the Suez Canal economic zone, for example. There is a valuable Chinese investment in this area, you see. There is, for example, the other projects which we mentioned now, you see, there is a good investment in oil sector, Chinese investment in oil sector, for example. You see, I can mention as well that very important assistance and investment in producing the COVID-19 vaccine. This is extremely important, because it started in a period when Egypt was in a very big need to combat COVID-19, and we and the Egyptian side made an agreement with the Chinese company to produce that vaccine in Egypt. This is a good example of Chinese assistance to Egypt, Chinese investment as well, and in a very hard time. They invested as well with the Egyptian side in producing the masks, for example. You see, Egypt, the production of masks in Egypt was very limited when the outbreak started, but now Egypt produces lots, an extremely big number of masks every day. You see, this is done also with the Chinese company. You see, so actually, you can name many sectors where the Chinese companies are working on in Egypt, are assisting Egypt. Of course, there is some kind here of transfer of technology in certain areas. I would like to mention as well another example which is extremely important, but it took place years ago. The production of insulin in Egypt, for example. This is done with Chinese technology. Now, for 15 years, it's not a new issue. It's not a new thing. But it took place in collaboration with a giant Chinese company to produce insulin in Egypt, for example. You see, so there are actually many examples of such cooperation in production in Egypt.
Right. The initiative of the Belt and Road that was launched by the Chinese president earlier, how are both countries going to benefit to their best interests from it?
Well, actually, this initiative, as you know, it started in 2013. In 2014, China started implementing this initiative with 3 countries worldwide. Egypt is one of them in 2014. Then in 2015, the actual cooperation started within the context of this initiative. I mentioned now the Chinese area in Suez Canal Economic Zone, for example. This is part of this initiative because the area of Suez Canal is an important part of the Chinese initiative itself. You see, so the Suez Canal Economic Zone is important for both Egypt as it's a national mega project. It's as well important to China because it's part of their initiative. You know, the Chinese ships passing the Suez Canal, for example, they constitute the biggest number of ships passing through this canal. So Suez Canal for China is extremely important. So they would like to be present in that area, to invest in that area, to have projects with the with the Egyptian companies in that area. And as I said, this Chinese area in the Suez Canal Economic Zone is already there. Already investments started in this area. We have sizable investment, Chinese investment in this area. And this takes place in the context of the Chinese initiative. Another example, is the Bemban energy station there. You know, it's a solar station there, a mega project taking place in Aswan, in Bemban, which will be the biggest solar station worldwide. And this station is financed by a bank, which is AIIB Bank, which is a relatively new bank, but one third of the capital of this bank is Chinese. So China supports very much that project, again in the context of the Chinese initiative, which you mentioned. You see, so I'm giving just some examples, but actually the cooperation between the two countries has started already, going on already within the Chinese initiative of One Belt and One Road.
let us also talk about the Chinese tourism to Egypt. As we all know that there are different seasons of tourism in Egypt, because Egypt is considered as the top destinations chosen to be visited worldwide. Among the visitors is the Chinese tourism. How is that going to be able to enforce and empower the flow of Chinese tourism to Egypt?
Chinese tourism to Egypt actually started, I can say, around 2000, 2003, 2004. Before that, there was no tourism to Egypt from China. So in 10 years, say from 2003, 2004 to less than 10 years, to 2010, the number of Chinese tourists into Egypt jumped actually into like 250,000, which was really a good thing. Then, of course, due to the situation that took place in Egypt, then the outbreak of COVID-19 and so on, the tourism in general dropped, including, of course, tourism from China. But now it's increasing again gradually. But actually, the Chinese tourism is mainly a cultural tourism. So they are mainly interested in our culture, mainly in Luxor, Aswan, and so on. In pharaonic, to visit pharaonic antiquities and in culture in general, you see. It's not tourism to go to beaches and so on, because they have beaches there. They have beaches around them, around China, in Thailand, and in other countries. So actually, their tourism to Egypt is cultural, you see. So we need actually to concentrate more on attracting Chinese tourists, especially, as I said, in cultural areas. And actually, again, I would like to mention this because I used not only myself, but the people who are really who know China and would like to boost this tourism more and more, that we need to have some kind of hotels for Chinese, offering their food, offering their culture there, because the Chinese, they have a very specific cultural specifications, you see. So we need to do more to attract the Chinese tourists, because reaching 250,000 or even 500,000 from China, it's not enough. Actually, it's not enough. We need more and more, because if you know the volume, volume of the Chinese tourism worldwide, it's more than 150 million tourists. So we need to attract more and more, actually.
Hopefully, inshallah. But let's talk about Egypt as the gate to Africa.
Yes.
Retaining its leading role and also attaining the chairmanship of the African Union 2 years later, earlier before. So to China, this is very precious. So how is Egypt, in other words, going to invest as its gate to being a gate to Africa, to be able to attract Chinese investment in Africa, in Egypt, and all over the continent?
Well, actually, to be frank, China exists everywhere in Africa. Everywhere in Africa. And the Chinese investments in Africa are very large, very large. So, of course, there are efforts from the Egyptian side to go together to Africa in what we call trilateral cooperation, means Egypt, China, and African countries. But this is still, how can I say? It's not very successful, I can say. I am sorry to say that, because China already exists in Africa, everywhere. And they know Africa quite well. So in some areas, yes, they might need Egypt, you see, to be there, because of course Egypt's role in Africa is very significant. But China exists already there. China actually assists every African country. China invests in every African country. But still there is room for improvement from our side in this sector, in this specific aspect, to go together for trilateral cooperation there.
Right. Ambassador Magdy Amer, Egypt's former ambassador to China, I would like to thank you, sir, very much, and you have a beautiful day. And we're going to go to a short break, and we'll come to continue the breakfast show later on, so stay with us.
شمسنا أجمل تحية جنب المصانع والمداخن والزحام الغطار اللي آخر غلبتنا وبراج الحمام شوف هنا جنب المصانع والمداخن والزحام
Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International, and continuing our coverage of the visit of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to China. And this was upon the invitation of his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, to attend the inauguration of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and to shed more light on the historic Egyptian-Chinese relations. We're most delighted to be joined over the phone by His Excellency Ambassador Ali Al-Hifni, former Deputy Foreign Minister and also the former Ambassador to China. A very good morning, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
Good morning, it's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours, Your Excellency. First of all, if you can tell us, walk us through the Egyptian-Chinese ties and how did it develop over the years?
Let's first say that Egypt and China, they share so many things, one of which is that